This is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, and I'm here with my weekly Friday reads. I am having a great reading week, so I can't wait to tell you about it. I am still reading This Tender Land by William Kent Krueger. I think when I recorded last week, I had only just started it. As you can see, I'm like 3/4 of the way through now, maybe a little bit more. I am loving this book. It is so good. I have been listening to friends and, people online tell me how great William Kent Krueger is for years. And this book in particular, This Tender Land, so many of my friends have raved about it. It happens to be, let me see, my bookmark is from our library. It happens to be our all-county reads book for this year. So the author is coming to give a talk in May. It is also, because of that, it is also our book club's pick for our April discussion. It's just as good as everyone has said, maybe even better. I'm just loving it. So it's about a group of orphans who are on their own. It's set in 1932 during the Depression. It begins in Minnesota. So it begins at an Indian school in Minnesota. Now you may have heard about these from back at that time. They were pretty common. Basically, they weren't for orphans. They were meant to, they took Indian children away from their families and their communities to educate them, basically make them more white. It was a horrible thing. The whole thing was just awful. In this book, at one particular Indian school in southern Minnesota, there are two white boys there too, two brothers. Otis, make sure I got the names right. I keep saying that wrong. It's Odie. Odie and Albert. Their mother died when they were young. Their father died when Odie, sorry, I'm terrible with names. When Odie was 8 and Albert was 12. And that's when they were sent to live at the Indian school, just because it was nearby. Well, Odie has figured out as he's gotten older that the owners wanted the money that the state gives them. This particular Indian school was a terrible place. The owners were cruel. The kids were barely fed. They were worked hard. There was very little actual schooling taking place. So Odie and Albert have been living at this place for the last 4 years. I'm trying to think. Yeah, that's about where the story picks up. Their best friend is an Indian boy at the school who's been named Moses. He was found as a baby in a ditch with his dead mother and with his tongue cut out. Horrifying. Because he was found abandoned among reeds, they named him Moses. So the kids usually call him Mose. Luckily, when Odie and Albert came to the school, they knew sign language because their mother had been born deaf. So they taught Mose and he could finally communicate. Now, there aren't a lot of other people at the school who understand sign language or will take the trouble to learn. There are a couple of very kind teachers who've helped the boys and who learned sign language so that they could communicate with Mose. But for the most part, Odie and Albert translate for him. So these three kids, they're in a bad situation. Things are really awful there. And then, no spoilers, things get worse. They get to the point where they decide they have to leave. The violence has increased. They're in danger. They need to escape. They take a canoe and head off on the river along with a little girl named Emmy, who's only about 6 years old. So the three boys are like older brothers to her. They're caring for her. The four of them set off down the river. So the river that runs near their school leads into the Minnesota River, which leads into the Mississippi. So their intention is to head down the Mississippi, like Huck Finn. And I really don't want to tell you much more about the story because there's so much that happens to these kids. It's an adventure, but there's also a lot of danger. And of course, all they want is a home and a family and a place to belong. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. The kids are just great, and, you're rooting for them, and they're wonderful characters. The setting during the Depression in 1932 is, historically, it's really stunning to read about some of this. They get involved with all kinds of different things on their journey down the rivers. I'm just loving this book. It is just as great as everyone said. I don't know why I waited so long to read it. But thank you to my county library system for choosing this book as the all-county reads. This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger. I can't wait to read more, though I also don't want it to end. And on audio this week, I've been listening to something quite different. A science fiction novel written by Arthur Conan Doyle. So I thought it was time for another classic. I've got a big audio backlog. I went through my list and I found this. I didn't even know that Doyle had ever written any science fiction. I thought he only wrote the Sherlock Holmes stories. So this was a pleasant surprise. It is about, I'm trying to think when it's set. I think it was published in 1912, I think. So it's probably set about that time. It begins in England, where a journalist decides to go along on a scientific expedition. One sort of eccentric scientist that the rest of the scientists think is crazy has publicly stated that he found a place in South America in the Amazon where prehistoric life still exists. Yes, we're talking dinosaurs. So the journalist signs up to go on this expedition. Where I am now, there are these two scientists who butt heads all the time. One of them is the one who'd been there before. The other one is one of the ones who thinks he's crazy. And the journalist is there, and they've got this whole expedition. And they've been traveling down the Amazon, and they have finally gotten to this isolated plateau where the professor says prehistoric life still exists. So they have to find a way to get up onto the plateau. He says that's why no one knows about this place, is because it's so isolated and the animals really can't get off the plateau. Because it was written and published in 1912, there is some troublesome characterization in it, some just blatant racism that just makes you cringe, particularly once they get on that expedition and they hire help. I'm sure you can imagine. But, keeping in mind when it was written, the story so far is engrossing and interesting. The characters are good. Apparently, Doyle wrote a whole series of books about this scientist whose name is Professor Challenger. And this was the first one. So I'm enjoying it so far. I'm interested to see where the plot goes and what's going to happen next. That's The Lost World by Arthur Conan Doyle. And that's what I'm reading this weekend. I would love to hear what you're reading. What's sitting on your book stand? What on your nightstand? What are you getting ready to read? Tell me all about it in the comments below. And I hope you have a great weekend.